We're going to continue my monologue in just a second, but first, joining us is the president's attorney, Jay Sekulow, also the chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice. Yes, he has done legal work for me in the past for the 4,000th time. You know, Jay, I have your letter. I read your statement. It's everything you've been saying, Rudy's been saying, Dowd, others before. Unprecedented cooperation, no collusion, no Russia collusion, no obstruction.
Yeah, well, let me tell you what the report says, because it's 400 pages and there's a lot to read, but let me give you the top line findings of Bob Mueller. These are statements that are contained in the report. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. The investigation did not establish that the contact described in Volume 1, that's the entire issue of collusion, amounted to an agreement to commit any violation of federal criminal law, including foreign influence or campaign finance laws. In other words, there was no evidence sufficient enough to bring any kind of case regarding any violations of these statutes. The investigation did not identify evidence that any U.S. person conspired for coordinating with the IRA. Those were the ones that were alleged to be involved in hacking. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Further, the evidence was not sufficient. In any case, this is an interesting one, too, that everybody's glossing over, that says that there was any conspiracy with any representative of the Russian government regarding the 2016 election. I could go on for pages and pages. The point is, this investigation started because of allegations about conspiracy or collusion, as it was called, regarding the Trump campaign and the Russian government or Russian agents. This report not only vindicates the president completely, but the fact is that the President of the United States has gone through a 2.5-year investigation. By the way, it's actually long, it went back to, we know it started in 2016. It was called Crossfire Hurricane. It's been going on for almost 3 years. And the parameter at which it was set was to determine Russian interference with the election, and was there any involvement with the president or the campaign, and the answer was no, there was not. And that was the basis upon which this entire investigation started.
The Attorney General Barr said the other day, and there was a media freakout over it, that yes, the Trump campaign was spied upon. Now, it happened a number of ways. It happened vis-a-vis the FISA warrant full of the Hillary bought and paid for, of all things, Russian lies, as the bulk of information, according to the Grassley Graham memo. But also, Stefan Halper was empowered to meet George Papadopoulos and Sam Clovis and Carter Page. Are we really to believe the origins of this, as they claim, was George Papadopoulos and a drink set up? Do you believe that origin? Because that would not warrant what has just happened to this country.
You know, I never thought I would say this, that I agreed with Peter Strzok, the agent that was had the text mails regarding the president back and forth with Lisa Page. But he said there was no there there. Guess what? There was no there there. But here's what's important. Now we have to find out what is the origin of this. The Attorney General said something last week very important, that spying on a campaign is a big deal. And when you have a situation, which we know happened here, when you have a situation like this that has taken place, you have to get now to the bottom of this, because I represent this president, but some lawyer in the future is going to represent another president. And for the sake of the presidency, no president should have to go through what this president has gone through on this issue. Unprecedented. By the way, not only was it unprecedented in its scope, but it was unprecedented in the response that we provided to that office of special counsel. We gave over, I say we, the White House, the president, the campaigns, 1.4 million pages of documents, hundreds of witness interviews, and on, and no executive privilege. And I love the chyrons on the networks this morning, redacted report coming, and then, of course, it comes, and guess what? Not much redaction. The only thing that's really redacted that was significant is 16 material, which has to be, and there wasn't that much of that. So the reality is this was as transparent as any investigation and any administration, in my view, in U.S. history.
Jay, you know, on the obstruction side of things, Mueller didn't make the definitive decision, but the Attorney General did in counsel with the Office of Legal Counsel, even Rod Rosenstein, which is interesting to me.
Well, he made something very interesting. One thing here, Sean, he actually did, because he made a determination, because in this sense,
It's determinative.
If there was a case of obstruction, believe me, he would have stated
exactly.
it without any apology. He did not.
Here's the point, though. Now, we now know for a fact that they were talking about taping the president without his knowledge and consent. They were talking about invoking the 25th Amendment. Now, they didn't do it. Donald Trump didn't hide the fact that this was a witch hunt. He acted, to me, as somebody who was innocent. He was screaming his innocence loudly and expressing frustration justifiably against Rod Rosenstein, Robert Mueller, his team of merry Democratic donors, Jeannie Ray, Clinton's former attorney, Andrew Weissman with his atrocious record. He was going after all of them. He said it all publicly. And that's the list of 10. And I'm saying, okay, now, if that's obstruction, then that means anybody that proclaims their innocence loudly and clearly would be obstructing. That is the biggest,
it's called the First
example.
Amendment. Yeah, it's called the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. The president, like every other citizen, has the freedom of speech. Here was a president that was under attack from the moment he came down the elevator to till this morning or this afternoon when the report came out, has been under attack. We know that there's been this inquiry has been going on, as I said, for 3 years, and the president defended himself. He had the constitutional right to do that. He did it. And for that, now, for the country's sake, we don't let this happen again, ever again, when a situation like this. That's why you got to find out how this started. I think the Attorney General is going to do the right thing.
Well,
no
I
question.
can tell you, there is an avalanche, as I have been reporting, coming in days and weeks ahead. We will hold them accountable. I am not letting this go because what they did is wrong and illegal and an abuse of power, and it's corrupt. Jay, great job to you, Rudy, your entire team, and thank you for all you did.
So here now, Democratic Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, who sits on the House Intelligence Committee. Sir, good to have you here tonight. Thank you for being here. What's the Democrats' next move? We talked about, some members of your party that have suggested that this is a roadmap here, if you choose to take it, for impeachment.
I guess I would just examine the premise of what we're doing here tonight. I mean, our next move, I'll tell you what. First, I want to read the report. I want to think about it carefully. None of us has even seen the fully unredacted report. I sit on the House Intelligence Committee. We also need to see all the classified parts of this report, and then we should form an opinion about it. I think this much is clear. The Russians attacked our country. We should care about that. The fact is that the president's conduct may not have been criminal, and I'll accept that finding, but I don't think it's been correct. I don't think it's been good. And I think the fact that improper and unethical, unpatriotic conduct is being treated as some sort of indication is an indication of just how far our politics have sunk. What I want us to understand is what's right and what's wrong. And there's a lot of wrong conduct in this report. It stinks to high heaven what the campaign did, what the president did, the way they attempted to get information, were willing to get information, the way they sought to obstruct the investigation, even if in non-criminal ways. None of that is what I want from the President of the United States. It's not what my kids should see in the actions of their leader. And I think that all of us should just get clear on what's right and what's wrong. And there's a lot to be very concerned about here, even if it doesn't rise to the level of being criminal, even if it doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. The president has been absolutely appalling in his conduct, and we should expect better. All
right. Understood. But I asked, what happens now, and I know you say you want to read the whole report. It sounds like you've read a lot of it based on everything that you just said. So what is your, you all are saying you want Robert Mueller to testify in front of Congress. What would you want to ask him based on what you know so far? Why do you want Robert Mueller there, if you do? And what would you want to know?
Here's what I want to do. I want to do constitutional, responsible, fair oversight. I want the public to know as much as possible. Of course, Bob Mueller should testify. Of course, we should have the full report out in the public domain where people can debate it and form their own opinions. I don't want to see investigations just for the sake of investigation. And ultimately, it's pretty clear we're going to have an election in a year and a half, and we're going to decide the course our country should pursue. I represent a district that voted for President Trump. I respect the people that wanted to give him a chance. I respect the fact that a lot of people think some of his policies are good. I may disagree with that, but that's a fair disagreement. But we should all agree that there is no doubt anymore. The Russians attacked our country in a sweeping and unprecedented way. We have not adequately responded to that. We should not excuse conduct that's wrong, lying, covering up, getting in the way of investigations, when the public has a right to know. So our next move, it seems to me, is to do good oversight, to ask fair questions, to let the public know the truth, and then to let the people decide whether this is the kind of conduct we should get in our president or whether we can expect more. Well, and by the way, we need to stand up to dictators like Vladimir Putin that attack the United States of America, and I think we can expect that the President of the United States should be strong about that.
Yeah, well, I think some would argue that he has been. And, you know, it's very interesting to go through all the obvious outreach that was there from different entities in Russia, you know, sort of testing the soft spots, trying to figure out if they could make headway with some of these individuals who were involved in the campaign. But at every turn, as you go through it, it was rebuffed. You know, there's this whole, I think about Carter Page, who just, you know, whose name became a household word during the course of this whole thing. And so when I went through it this morning, I was curious to see what they actually found on Carter Page, just as one example. And I'm granted, you know, there's a lot here, but this is just one example, right? So it says on page 95 in Volume 1, the investigation did not establish that Page coordinated with Russian government in its efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. That's a pretty big headline. It's a simple sentence, but it's a pretty big headline given all of the discussion. Then you go on, and there's this back and forth. Page was asking if President Trump should go speak at a graduation in Russia, and he also wanted to take a trip to be part of this event in Russia. And he keeps approaching the campaign, and Corey Lewandowski, the campaign manager, responds the same day saying, if you want to do this, it would be outside of your role with DJT for president campaign. I am certain Mr. Trump will not be able to attend. You know, and it's just an example of a very sort of clear-cut moment in all of this that just got so blown out of proportion over the course of 2 years. What do you think about that?
I think we should try to remain focused on what actually matters, and it sure as heck isn't Carter Page. What matters is that the Russians attacked the United States of America. Just hold that thought for a second. That what matters is that the President of the United States directed the White House counsel to remove the special counsel, and he only didn't get away with it because Don McGahn said no. What matters is that he told the National Security aide, K.T. McFarland, to cook up some story about what happened with Ambassador Kislyak, and she said no. In other words, what is clear from the report is that the president seemed to engage every way he could to obstruct it.
Well, I understand that, but you know, the other finding is that
excuse me.
I have let you explain yourself in great detail. So I just want to say one thing, and then I will let you go on. I will let you go on, sir.
The point is that,
excuse me. I have something to say.
Excuse me. The point is that Carter Page is way down the list on what matters.
You're very rude, sir. That was rude. I was just trying to interject for a moment, and I don't want to interrupt, but I wanted to say one thing about the underlying crime here. When there's not an underlying crime with regard to collusion, it's difficult to say that someone is obstructing something. So you just laid out your thinking on why you think the president was being obstructive, but if there's no underlying crime, that is one of the reasons that Robert Mueller was unable to make a finding there. I'm sorry for getting heated, but please go ahead.
Right. Well, you can call your guests as many names as you want. I guess the point I was trying to make, ma'am, is that Carter Page is not the main story here. So I'd encourage you to try to stay focused on what matters. And what matters is that the President of the United States sought and was eager to accept help from a foreign adversary. A dictator named Vladimir Putin attacked the United States. We've not adequately responded. Real issues were at stake, like control of eastern Ukraine, for goodness sake, the health of the transatlantic alliance. All these things are on the table. Yeah. And what we should care about is that the president and his aides lied about it and sought to obstruct it. And what the report tells us is that they've done things that are wrong. And I will concede, as Robert Mueller has found, that it's not prosecutable. But I don't think it's right. And I think we can stay focused on that.
I'm glad that you don't think that issue with Carter Page mattered. It ruined the guy's life for 2 years. He was the subject of 4 FISA investigations. So at some point, everybody was told that this guy was a Russian spy. And as I said going into that conversation, this is just one example, one slice of what we've been dealing with here for 2 years, but it is significant for those reasons. Thank you very much,
right, well,
Representative Mahoney.
Excuse me, you didn't hear it from me, and I don't think you can roll that up to the Democrats that the media reported it wrong.
All right. Thank you, sir. Good to see you again.
All right, well,
I didn't call you names, by the way. I just said that you were kind of rude in that exchange. So.